Oh, be thinking of that. You guys are laughing. I'm serious. Okay. So, detach from drama. So, let me talk to you a little bit about the genesis. My cousin and I started writing this book many, many moons ago. And we were writing it for coaches and for therapists. She's a social worker, therapist, a professor at Cal State LA. And I was writing it for coaches. And what we discovered was that people are not going to pay coaches for work around drama. They can already do that work themselves. It's what they're looking for is trying to understand their clients. And leaders kept asking me, "Can you please tell me what I can do to help people in my organization who are so much drama infused? Like there's so much going on, the emotional contagion." I have a friend that's working in a restaurant, and there's so much drama going on in that restaurant. People can't quit talking about each other, and then they share. And then I had a little bit of a conversation about when it's okay to share. And my absolute rule is never. Like you don't get to go tell somebody else what somebody is saying about them. And so it has just continued to evolve into organizations want to control the noise. Organizations want to control, to help people be successful, and noise is what's blocking. So we're going to talk about detach from drama in terms of how it starts, and then what are some solutions for it once it has started, because we can do some work around bringing it into what we need to think about and correct. So let me pull up the slides. Okay, here we go. My Zoom isn't working the way it should. Okay. And I'm going to start with the last slide first, right? That's how we always do it in Peggy World. Okay. So when we put it together, the idea is how do we move from reactivity to agency? Again, my next book is on agency. And so, how do we give people the grounding to be able to deal with what's happening from the dysregulation they have themselves and also the dysregulation they're experiencing around others? So, what are we really talking about? What turns a hard moment into a story that won't let go? So, drama is not about the hardship itself. It's what happens when the emotion becomes the story, inflated or distorted, and resolution takes a back seat to reaction. We keep telling the story. Detaching from drama isn't about disengaging from emotion, it's engaging it differently. So we have to think about what's going on behind the scenes when we're talking about drama. So the book is laid out in 5 phases, and it's a cycle. Okay, so what happens is we have a thought or an experience. And so when I was writing this, I was like really um, I don't want to say entertained, but I was really connected to the idea that it doesn't have to be an experience. It doesn't have to be an event. It only has to be a thought. We can actually think ourselves into drama. So think about, have you ever had a bad dream and you wake up in the morning and you're in a bad mood? And then in that bad mood, you start to collect other things that make that bad mood even bigger because it's what was happening in our subconscious, right? Or when we start thinking about when somebody did something to us and how we're annoyed by it, we think ourselves into drama. And what happens is we make meaning. And the meaning making piece of drama is probably the biggest because it's how we make rational what's happening in our life. And so we put an interpretation to what we're perceiving. And we're going to talk more about meaning making, but meaning making goes all the way back to culture, how we've been raised, how our families interacted. All of that is part of how we make meaning. We make meaning similar to other people. And that is one of the challenges in organization, is the idea of worldview, because everybody makes meaning differently. And so we have to help people understand how they're making meaning in order to help them understand how to look differently at the meaning they're making. And then once we've made the meaning, and what I say is when our outside world does not align with our inside world, it's upsetting. What we want to have happen isn't happening, and so we now get an emotional hit. Our expectations are going unmet, and when our expectations go unmet, we get an emotional hit. And that's what really starts the cascade. Like, we might have the thought, we might be going, that person shouldn't be doing that. But that emotional hit that makes us uncomfortable causes us to want to act on it. And so in order to act on it, we have to create a story. We need that story to amplify others into our life. So it's how we recruit. In drama, we're recruiting others to agree with us. In fact, our first definition of drama was when we are trying to engage others to think the way we think about a certain situation that has an emotional hit. So this is wrong, right? And so we find the people that will agree with us that, yeah, that's wrong. That is a really bad idea. And then not only do we have emotional contagion with the one person we tell, we typically are finding people that will agree with us and create more emotional contagion. And so we have a ripple effect that goes through organizations. And how hard that is when we are talking in an organization and trying to control the noise, as I said earlier, it makes it really difficult. So we are at emotional contagion. So let's back up and go through what happens in that thought, experience, and events. So thoughts are the first interpreter. What are we thinking, and what does that look like for us as we are thinking about what's happening? Okay. And it could be something that happened yesterday. We wake up in the morning and we're angry about something somebody did yesterday at work, and we can't let go of it. Rick Hansen talks about negativity bias and how our brains are wired to think negatively before we can move them into positivity. So we have to think about what we're really trying to do in this pattern breaking, because it's immediately to deal with threat. So the negativity bias is part of our way of being, because we had to know what was a threat and what wasn't. Because if we didn't interpret something as a threat and it was a threat, we were dead. But now we interpret everything as a threat. And so what does that do? That sets off our fight, flight, or freeze. So when we are in this experience and we're building this process, this emotional hit, it's fight, flight, or freeze that goes into building the emotions and the stories. And we have to be able to separate events from experiences. And this is really important for coaching and leading, is that just because somebody is having an experience doesn't mean we have that same experience. We have to acknowledge that the other person is having an experience, their worldview is creating the experience, and therefore we have to help them unpack it instead of, well, I don't worry about that. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, well, I don't worry about that. You just need to grow a thicker skin. And that is the most frustrating comment that people can make. No, you don't have to grow a thicker skin. You get to own that experience. And even if it's different from somebody else, it's still your experience. And if we're going to help people move in and break the pattern of emotional dysregulation, we cannot deny they're having that experience. We have to help them navigate it, excavate it, and then navigate it. So again, we talked about emotional noise in sustaining impact. Emotional noise is a big factor in thoughts and experience. So if we're not already upset about something, Just go to the internet right now and pull up a reel. And I guarantee you that you can be upset in less than 5 seconds about something that's happening on the internet. That's the emotional noise that Sean is talking about. And once we start feeling that, then we have the emotional hit. So, or actually we make meaning before the emotional hit. So the meaning making is so important as we're working with others and working with ourselves, because we don't have shared meaning about everything. The meaning making is the hinge. It's a global versus situational meaning. How did we start to think this way? Is this part of our family? Is this part of the way of our growing up? Is this part of the way we were educated? Is this part of our religious beliefs? What is it part of? Okay, so that's the difference between global and situational meaning. And I can't tell you how many leaders talk to me and say, I can't believe they think that way. I know. Okay, but they think that way. So we have to accept people think that way because of worldviews. And now we have to work within that. Okay, so meaning making in relationships, we gravitate to people who make the same meaning we make. So as soon as we're not making the same meaning together, then we're at odds. And so that creates the emotional hit as well. They don't think like me. So that bothers me because they won't think like me. But guess what? People don't all think alike. And that's how we have to help others understand how we're making meaning and how they didn't have the same experience. Therefore, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. That's when we come back to event and experience. So we do have patterns. Okay. We have faulty meaning making patterns, which is putting things into boxes and say, whenever anybody does this, it's wrong, it's bad, they shouldn't be doing it. I will tell on myself, I like to narrate when I'm in the car. And so it's about drivers and what drivers are doing. When I'm with Vessel and Cheryl in South Africa, I'm always asking them if people are allowed to do those things. And they're like, okay, yeah, they are. They're allowed. Okay. And so the meaning making is what we can do in the US, what we can't do in South Africa. And I'm always going, can they do that? So that was an expectation I had on how people should drive. And I had to talk about it. And both of them were like, you need to let that go. Because it's true. Okay. Like getting upset about how people drive is not something we can change. So faulty meaning making patterns give us what we perceive as agency, and we can make people be different and we can make things be different, but we cannot. Okay. Then we get into how we create reality, and our reality is constructed based on all of the ways that we put meaning into life. And so a place to help others and ourselves is to go back to, when did we start believing this? How did we start constructing this? How do we deconstruct what we believe and what we think is important? And then the neuroscience of meaning is about how we talk to once we create it in our mind, it means that it's there. And what do we do now that it's in our mind? Because it's already been created, the pattern is there, the thinking is there. So we have to break down what's going on with the thinking. Meaning making in language is really interesting because language has a lot of different meanings when you go to different cultures. So what does it mean? You know, some cultures tend to be very direct. Some cultures tend to be very abrupt. Other cultures tend to dance around everything. And so we need to know what meaning is being made based on culture and language. And by the way, this last one, it's not found, it's made. The meaning we make starts when we're children by the information that we're taking in. So part of the core question here is, what story am I telling myself about this? And is it the only one available? What is the story I'm starting to construct? And mostly it starts with a word track that says, they're not allowed. They shouldn't. The world shouldn't. Like somebody should be controlling it. So I'm going quickly, but in the book, and you see this in the slides, in the book, we see how people make meaning Julia sends her manager a report and gets silence. By day 4, she's convinced herself he regretted hiring her, he regretted assigning her to the project, and that she's going to get fired. The truth, when she finally asked, is that her boss had just been buried in work all week. Don't we do that? Don't we make stuff up when we don't have information? And it goes back to our meaning, because our meaning would say, if I didn't respond to something, it means I didn't like it. I was avoiding talking to someone. And so we put our meaning, we assign our meaning onto everybody else. And this is where it starts. It doesn't start with the emotional hit. It's the meaning that we need to start deconstructing. So then we get into the emotions, okay, and how emotions are constructed. And so we have the evolutionary wisdom of emotion, which I call emotions are data. They are telling us something. Why we're triggered, what is triggering us, and why. When we get into agency without anger, we're talking about the patterns. So there's patterns that are triggering us that are going on that are true for drama as well. They're data. They're not telling us where we need to go. We use both the ruler and the pause model. So the ruler is a model that talks about recognize, then understand, then label the emotion correctly. Most of the time we say we're angry or sad. When I work with clients, I work with groups, and I say, so name every emotion you can think of. And most people can only get to 6, okay? Because they don't think beyond that, because they haven't been informed about that there is a greater group of emotions out there. So we use Mark Brackett's ruler work, and he has 100. And so now when we're excavating what's going on emotionally to find the pattern, we can go very deep, because we're not just resting on 5 or 6. So we recognize that emotions are constructed, that it's part of our history. When did we notice that we were angry about an event, about a situation? How did we construct that? And then Goleman talks about the amygdala hijack. And we talk about this a lot in our coaching program, that you have when the amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain, is hit, it means that we shut down on the hippocampus. And there is not a person who is able to be hijacked emotionally and think logically, because it covers it up. So then we start talking about, when you feel that hijacking, what are some things you can do to get back in balance so that you can access the logic? And when we have chronic emotional activation, this is the saddest part for me, because this is the polyvagal nerve theory, where it's talking about always, 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 and continually being in fight, flight, or freeze, always being in surveillance, always looking for what the threat is, always looking for what's wrong. And that emotional activation biologically creates adrenaline, creates cortisol, and those things are running through our bodies, and we have to get rid of them. But it's constant, okay? And there's so much research on this, and I spend a lot of time talking about that in Detach from Drama. And then how do we put emotional intelligence into action? Then the 4th place is the stories. And this is really kind of fun, because this is where people make crap up, okay? When we make stories up, it shapes our identity. And it shapes our identity for us going into the victim. When we tell stories to other people, they're not entertaining unless we've been victimized. So we need to recruit them into our victimization so that they will agree with us. So there's a recruitment process in the stories that have ideas about, that are go back into the narratives about our rigid identity. I'm this, not that. I'm this, not that. And so that's rigid identity narratives that we need to focus on and see if there's anything happening in this space. The victim stories and the cycle of drama, they just keep it going. But here's the worst part. The victim stories that we share with other people connect to their victim stories. So I tell you a victim story about my boss doing something, but you have a victim story about your mom doing something. And so now you're upset and unwound about some things that happened when you grew up. So it's not just they stay focused on the here and now, they expand all the way through that part of the pattern that exists within our brain. And then we live into the story. We make them true. Like we look for areas where we've been victimized. We look for people who victimize us. And the brain clings to narrative because that's what makes the world safe. It's what makes the world comfortable. The story is true for me, therefore I'm safe in the story, no matter what it's doing to my body. So we have to think about how we rewire the brain in drama, just like we do in sustaining impact. We get into the social comparison narratives that happen on Facebook and the reels day in and day out. And then what's the invitation to drama? What's the recruitment process that goes on? And so one of the things when I'm working with clients, I will say, okay, you can build a story, but you can only tell it 3 times. Someone who is committed to drama wants to tell it 50 times. But if they have to stop telling it and they can only tell it 3 times, they cut way, way back. If they're really committed to not doing it, then you realize how many times you want to tell that story. And all that story does is keep you lit up. So it's really powerful when we say, okay, I'm only going to tell it 3 times. And then you don't want to tell it at all because then you gave up your right to tell it. So you stop doing it. So then the emotional contagion is the ripple effect that I just talked about. As you tell stories to someone, they tell someone. It's interesting working in organizations and a story starts, a rumor starts. We're not going to get our bonuses this year. And before you know it, half the organization thinks they're not getting bonuses when it has never been communicated. But it was a fear that got a story, and then that story got legs, and that's the ripple effect. And then that takes people away from being able to focus and to work on what really matters most. The receiver's power. The receiver can either accept the story and engage with the person or say, I'm not going to do that. So that's what we have to teach people in organizations to help people think about what is the power of the story, and is that the story you want to live into, and does that story take you where you want to go? And that's the receiver's power. You don't have to be victimized by the person that keeps telling you stories all the time. You have the ability to help them see that's not taking them where they want to go, nor is it taking you where you want to go. So group dynamics as amplifiers, that's enough to say, whenever we get into those dynamics, it just gets big fast. Emotional contagion is a choice. We get to decide who we engage with and who we share stories with. The sender-receiver model, as I just talked about the receiver power, the same story can land 3 ways. You have to be able to hear it in order for it to land 3 different ways. So how do we look at a story being told one way that is interpreted back to meaning in a different way? So we look at how are stories landing? Are stories creating what you want to create? Are they landing in a way that takes you where you want to go? And contagion isn't only negative. Our stories can be positive. So the example of the same story landing 3 ways is Jason vented to 2 people about the same dismissive boss. One friend fueled the anger while his brother kept asking him questions, and the whole interpretation shifted. So same story, 2 different receivers. And that's what we're saying. When people want to spread emotional contagion, they have to look for the receiver that will take them into the support of the story they're hearing. So the pause model comes from the book, and it talks about how do we use the pause at every level. How do we use the pause in thinking? How do we use how do we use the pause in meaning making? How do we use the pause with emotions? how do we use the pause with stories? I just told you one of the ways to use pause is you can only tell it 3 times. And then how do we use pause with emotional contagion? So we pause and notice. We stop for a minute and we ask what's going on. I'm working with a major organization in the United States. That's the third largest credit union in the United States. And every time we come to a integration cafe or a group meeting, somebody's talking about how they're using pause in their coaching. So pause and then acknowledge what's going on. Where are you feeling it? What is that emotion? Are we naming one of 100? Are we naming one of 2 or 6? Then we uncover where it's coming from, the belief, the fear, the story that's actually driving it. And then we say, what can I do differently? I ground myself and then I shift towards, I don't have to choose this, I can choose something else. And so the shift is first steady. Am I able to choose something else? And then what does that something else look like? And then we go into explore and act from insight to intention. The next time this happens, what do I want to do with it? So the pause gives us a moment to pause and then also take action in the direction of how we want to show up and how we want to be. So just like last class or last orientation, we talked about what's showing up for us from the program perspective. So in August, we have master classes. Again, they're a little bit late. I'm trying to make sure I'm more accommodating of Europe, but they are Thursdays, the master classes for Detach from Drama, and they're 4 weeks instead of 3. Event and meaning, emotions and drama, storytelling and drama, and emotional contagion. And that's what's happening in August. We also have Detox from Drama, which I suspect will be moved to start in September. So it might start August 21st, but I'm keeping it open to start in September. But it's Fridays, so it's your Friday night. But it's also the program. So it'll be the 4th, the 11th, the 18th, and 25th. And how do we detox from drama? It comes with a workbook and gives you a lot of skill from a development perspective. And then we're going to go into September and doing the master classes starting the 9th, the 16th, the 23rd, and the 30th. I will tell you, because we have so many people from South Africa and from Europe on the call, if we need to schedule something differently to be more accommodating to the group, I would be open to an earlier time that we might be able to schedule it in, especially since the detox is ending up on Friday nights, and who wants to spend Friday night doing that? So just for your information. So where do we start? Notice the pattern, pause before the story hardens, choose your response. Detaching from drama doesn't mean we're detaching from people. It means we're detaching from those patterns that keep you stuck. So just like sustaining impact, we have a chapter available, the first chapter of Detach from Drama, that's available at the website. If you want more information about what we just talked about, go to that link, Global IOC, Detach from Drama -2, and you'll be able to read more information about the book and about the activities that we have available going into our fall, your spring, and thinking about how you might be able to engage with us. Or you might know someone who wants to engage with us. So please keep us in mind if you have drama happening at your workplace or with even family members or whatever who might want to come. What I love about Detach from Drama is it's not just for organizations, it's for us as individuals, so that we can think about where we are in emotional regulation, but also how we can help others as they are working on their own emotional regulation. So just like last time, you have to ask a question for me to let you go.
I may, I don't. Thank you very much. That was really illustrative and useful. I'm not sure I understood the concept of global meaning. Does it really exist, or maybe I did not understand it well?
So when you think about global meaning, think about cultures, think about countries, and how we think a certain way about the world. And then situational is when we're driving, when we're interacting with family members, maybe. But the global meaning is things that we agree on consensus wise globally. Think about not just worldwide, but our organization can have global meanings about coming to work early, about wearing jeans at work. Those kinds of things are meaning that tend to be more global in nature than it's just happening right now in a situation. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Vessel, anything you want to add?
I must ask a question. So the previous question was how the master classes, the four pathways fit together. So probably how does APC, RPC, SRPC, and what we're talking here fit together?
Yeah. So, like, okay, let me explain real quickly what we have. We have two organizations. One is the Kairos Institute, and it owns the personal development and individual development material. So that it owns Sustaining Impact, Detach from Drama, and the new upcoming book, Agency Without Anger. And then Global IOC is the proprietor of the generative leadership, the leader coach program, where we certify coaches at the APC, the RPC, and the SRPC level, and where we do system analysis of what are the issues and patterns that are happening within the organization across the system, not just the individual leader, but throughout the system. So we have two bodies of work that come together and influence each other. So the personal development influences what goes on in organizations, and sometimes what's going on in organization influences the individual. So we keep them in different buckets, but they're doing similar work together. Does that make sense?
Does make sense. And I think what is exciting is that people that have done the coaching program can also become facilitators of the master classes.
Yes, yes. So that's the next generation, and that is I don't want books to sit on the shelf like my two are sitting on there right now. I want the information out, not just as a book, but how to use it. The master classes go into helping people understand it, but better use it. Knowledge without application is useless. If we can't apply what we just learned, then we're going to forget it. Remember, all the research says if you don't apply what you learn in 30 days, you forget it. And so
Mhm.
we want to encourage people to go deep with it and use it. So yes, master classes, the Global IOC, APC, RPC are all going to be facilitator driven in the future as well. So we have a lot of opportunity for anybody that wants to join us and have some fun spreading the word. So any
And
other questions?
Cheryl, when Peggy comes in November, we will also try and fit in a facilitator training program for these
For the master
programs.
classes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That sounds
in
brilliant.
person.
That is really well done. Well done, Peggy.
It's you guys that bring it to life. Okay. I can put it on paper, but it takes the rest of the community to move it. And that's what I'm so excited about because we've moved so much in your school, Cheryl, and it's just been a really awesome opportunity. So, Christelle, I'm not sure we've ever met. Are you, have we met before?
Chris, if this is Christelle from school, she is the grade 7 teacher. So you probably
She
would have met her, but she had not online.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, so we've got Rachel here too. So let me know if you need anything, if I can help. Hi, Christelle.
Just by the way, Peggy, we don't talk of the global community, we talk of the global family.
That's right. That's right. The global family. So stay in touch, everyone. We do have 2 sessions tomorrow on agency without anger and the generative leadership. But stay in touch. If you need anything, you know where I am. Go to the website, look at what we have, read the chapters. Feel free to reach out if you need anything beyond that. And hopefully, I'll see some or all of you tomorrow. And I will look forward to that experience or somewhere in the master classes. Everybody, have a great evening. Those of you that are waiting to eat, thank you so much for your patience. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Thank